I'm Samantha Miller, 32, an accountant living in Boston with a life that's organized down to the penny. Our annual family reunion at my parents' lakeside home in New Hampshire should have been perfect: cloudless skies, laughter echoing across the water, and Mom's famous peach cobbler. But my sister Rebecca, 35, has always found ways to make me feel small about my careful spending habits. Little did she know, every dollar I saved was building towards something meaningful. When she mockingly called me a cheapskate during the gift exchange, humiliating me in front of our entire family, I finally decided enough was enough. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself. Growing up as the younger Miller sister meant living in Rebecca's shadow. Our family wasn't wealthy, but we were comfortable in our middle-class suburban home outside Boston. My parents, James and Margaret, worked hard to give us opportunities, Dad as a high school science teacher and Mom as a nurse. They taught us the value of hard work, but somewhere along the way, Rebecca and I internalized very different lessons. From childhood, Rebecca commanded attention with her outgoing personality and flair for the dramatic. She was the one performing in school plays, running for student council, and later becoming prom queen. I was quieter, more analytical, finding comfort in books and numbers rather than spotlights. While Rebecca collected friends effortlessly, I nurtured a few deep friendships that have lasted to this day. "Sam, why don't you try out for cheerleading with your sister?" Mom would suggest, not understanding that I found joy in different pursuits. Dad, though more understanding of my temperament, still beamed with unmistakable pride at Rebecca's more visible accomplishments. The pattern continued into adulthood. After college, Rebecca landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm in New York. Her Instagram feed became a showcase of business-class flights, champagne brunches, and designer shopping sprees. I chose a different path, pursuing accounting and finding satisfaction in helping people manage their finances responsibly. "You know, you could afford nicer things if you wanted to," Rebecca would say during our monthly phone calls, mistaking my frugality for deprivation. "Life's too short to drive that old Honda." What my family didn't know was that my so-called cheap lifestyle had purpose. After witnessing the limited opportunities available to kids in Boston's underserved neighborhoods through my volunteer work, I developed a dream: opening a community center offering educational support, mentorship, and safe recreational activities. For 5 years, I'd been living below my means, investing carefully, and building a business plan that would make this dream reality. Our extended family reflected the same contrasting values as Rebecca and I. Uncle David, Dad's brother, built a successful construction business from nothing and understood the value of careful planning. Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, shared Rebecca's taste for luxury and often reinforced my sister's perspective that experiences and appearances were worth any price. Our grandparents, Eleanor and George, who would be attending the reunion, had survived the Great Depression and embodied traditional frugality. They'd always shown special affection for me, recognizing something of themselves in my careful ways. "That's Samantha," Grandpa would say, "she knows the difference between wants and needs." The annual family gift exchange had begun as a way to manage expectations during a financially tight year, with a $50 limit that stuck even as everyone's circumstances improved. Most family members respected this limit, using it as a challenge to find thoughtful gifts without focusing on monetary value. Rebecca, however, made a show of forgetting the limit every year. Last Christmas, she'd given Mom and Dad a weekend at an expensive resort, making everyone else's gifts seem inadequate in comparison. When I had privately reminded her about the agreement, she'd laughed. "Don't be such a buzzkill, Sam. No one actually wants to receive a $50 gift." In the days before this year's reunion, I carefully selected gifts that reflected thought rather than expense: a vintage fishing lure for Dad that matched one from his childhood collection, for Mom, a hand-bound recipe book with family favorites I'd collected from relatives, for Grandma Eleanor, a set of lavender sachets made from fabric that matched her wedding colors, and for Rebecca, a handmade photo album filled with family memories, including many from our childhood when we were still inseparable. I wrapped each present neatly, using simple brown paper decorated with pressed flowers from my window box garden. The total came to just under $200 for everyone, within my budget and the agreed limit. Looking at the wrapped gifts in my apartment, I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing each represented genuine thought rather than a swipe of a credit card. The night before the reunion, Rebecca called. "What are you wearing tomorrow?" she asked without preamble. "Probably my navy sundress," I replied, picturing the comfortable, classic dress I'd owned for several seasons. "That old thing?" "Sam, seriously, you need to update your wardrobe. First impressions matter, you know. Cousin Jennifer's new husband will be there, and he's some big-shot investment banker." I felt the familiar sting of her judgment but responded lightly, "The dress suits me fine. Not all of us need to dress for a magazine spread at a family barbecue." Her laugh held an edge. "Whatever you say. Just trying to help you make the best impression possible." After hanging up, I stood before my closet, briefly considering a last-minute shopping trip. Then I shook my head, reminding myself that my worth wasn't determined by my sister's approval or a designer label. Tomorrow would be about family connections, not fashion statements. Still, as I packed my sensible overnight bag, I couldn't shake the feeling that the familiar tensions with Rebecca were building toward something. Little did I know just how public our private rivalry would become at this year's gathering. The drive to my parents' lake house took just under 2 hours. As I navigated the familiar roads in my reliable 8-year-old Honda Civic, I rehearsed mental responses to Rebecca's inevitable comments about my car, my clothes, my life choices. This time, I promised myself, I wouldn't let her get under my skin. New Hampshire welcomed me with rolling hills and glimpses of sparkling water as I neared the lake. My parents had purchased this modest vacation home when I was in college, using an inheritance from my maternal grandfather. Though not extravagant, the cedar-sided house with its sprawling deck and private dock had become the heart of our family gatherings. I was among the first to arrive, finding Mom arranging flower centerpieces while Dad prepared the grill. "Samantha!" Mom exclaimed, embracing me. "You look lovely. That dress brings out your eyes." The simple compliment warmed me. Perhaps she noticed more than I gave her credit for. Dad hugged me tightly. "There's my number, Wiz. How was the drive?" "Smooth sailing," I replied, helping him carry coolers to the deck. Within the hour, cars began filling the gravel driveway. Uncle David and Aunt Patricia arrived with their teenage daughters. My cousins Mark and Jennifer pulled up in a rental car with Jennifer's new husband, the investment banker Rebecca had mentioned. Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George were helped from their son's car, moving slowly but with unmistakable eagerness to see the family gathered. Rebecca arrived last, making an entrance in her silver Audi convertible, designer sunglasses perched on her highlighted hair. She wore a flowy white sundress that probably cost more than my monthly rent and carried gift bags with designer logos prominently displayed. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, air-kissing everyone. Traffic from New York was brutal. She embraced me briefly. "Sam, you look comfortable. That dress has certainly stood the test of time." I returned her hug with genuine warmth, determined to start positively. "Thanks for noticing. It's practically vintage at this point. You look beautiful as always." The afternoon unfolded pleasantly enough. I helped Mom and Grandma in the kitchen, preparing side dishes while catching up on family news. Rebecca stationed herself on the deck with a glass of wine, regaling cousins with stories of her recent business trip to Milan. "The Italians really understand living well," I overheard her saying. My hotel suite had the most incredible marble bathtub with views of the Duomo. Worth every penny of the upgrade. When Jennifer's husband mentioned considering a Honda for their second car, Rebecca laughed. "God, why would you torture yourself? Life's too short for economy cars. Sam drives one of those, don't you, sis?" She turned to me as I emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of appetizers. "Still hanging on to that Civic like it's made of gold." "It gets me where I need to go," I replied evenly. "And it's fully paid off." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "See what I mean?" Such an accountant response. Grandpa George, overhearing, winked at me. "Smart girl." Cars are for transportation, not showing off. I busied myself helping wherever needed, setting up lawn games for the younger cousins while Rebecca documented the gathering with carefully posed photos for her social media. When Aunt Patricia's daughters asked if anyone would play badminton with them, Rebecca complained about potentially messing up her hair. I stepped in, spending a delightful hour teaching the girls proper technique. "Aunt Sam is so much fun," I heard 12-year-old Emma tell her mother. "She actually plays with us instead of just taking selfies." Grandma Eleanor needed help preparing her famous potato salad, her arthritic hands struggling with the chopping. I stationed myself beside her in the kitchen, following her verbal instructions while she supervised. "Rebecca never had the patience for cooking," Grandma observed. "Even as a little girl, she wanted the finished product without the process. You always understood that the care put into making something matters as much as the result." The comment touched me. "I learned that from you, Grandma." As afternoon shifted to evening, Rebecca's comments about my lifestyle grew more frequent. When I mentioned my upcoming vacation, a camping trip to Acadia National Park with friends, she scoffed. "Camping? With bugs and public showers? I just booked the presidential suite at that new resort in Bora Bora. Now that's a vacation." "Different strokes," I replied with a shrug. "I love falling asleep under the stars." "Well, some of us have standards," she said with a laugh that made several family members shift uncomfortably. Dad announced dinner would be ready soon, and Mom asked for help setting up the long tables on the deck. I immediately stood to assist, arranging tablecloths and place settings while Rebecca continued her conversation without offering to help. Mom had created place cards with thoughtful groupings. I found myself seated between Grandpa George and Cousin Mark, with Rebecca directly across from me. The table looked beautiful, with Mom's flower arrangements and candles creating a warm, festive atmosphere against the backdrop of the lake at sunset. As everyone took their seats for the feast, Dad raised a glass. "To family," he toasted. "The most valuable possession any of us will ever have." I caught Rebecca's eye across the table and raised my water glass to match her wine. For a brief moment, I glimpsed something like uncertainty in her expression before her confident smile returned. Little did I know that the real drama would unfold when the plates were cleared and the gifts came out. The lakeside dinner was magnificent. Dad's grilled salmon, Mom's roasted vegetables, and Grandma's potato salad created a feast that had everyone reaching for seconds. Conversation flowed easily, with updates on jobs, children's accomplishments, and community news. I shared stories about some of my accounting clients, keeping details confidential but describing the satisfaction of helping a young couple budget for their first home or guiding a small business owner through tax season. Rebecca dominated much of the conversation with animated tales of celebrity encounters at marketing events and detailed descriptions of her company's lavish holiday party. "They flew in a chef from Paris just for the dessert course," she explained, gesturing with her wine glass. "The chocolate soufflé was absolutely transcendent." As dinner concluded, Mom and Aunt Patricia began clearing plates. I immediately stood to help, gathering dishes and ferrying them to the kitchen. "Samantha, always the helpful one," Aunt Linda commented. "Rebecca, dear, why don't you help your sister?" Rebecca laughed lightly. "Sam's got it under control. Besides, I'm wearing white." She turned to Jennifer's husband. "So tell me more about that hedge fund you're working with." "I have some investments I'm looking to diversify." After helping with cleanup, I joined the others as they migrated to the living room where the gift exchange would take place. Presents were arranged on and around the coffee table, my simply wrapped packages alongside gift bags with designer logos and elaborate bows that were clearly Rebecca's. Mom, always the organized one, had created a system where each person would take turns opening one gift while everyone watched. "This way, we can all appreciate the thought that went into each selection," she explained with a smile. Grandpa George went first, unwrapping my gift of the vintage fishing lure. His eyes lit up with recognition. "Well, this is just like the one my father used to have." "How on earth did you find this, Samantha?" I explained how I'd searched online forums and connected with collectors until I found the exact model he'd described in his fishing stories. The room warmed with appreciative murmurs. The exchange continued with each person opening gifts and expressing genuine thanks. When Mom unwrapped Rebecca's gift, an expensive spa package, she gasped at the luxury but seemed equally touched by my handmade recipe book filled with family favorites. When my turn came, I opened a lovely scarf from Aunt Patricia, a book of nature photography from Uncle David, and then Rebecca's gift, an envelope containing a gift certificate for a styling session at an upscale Boston boutique. "Because you could use some professional help with your wardrobe," Rebecca explained, not unkindly but with a definite edge. "They'll teach you how to dress for your body type and career level." I forced a smile. "Thank you. That's thoughtful." The room felt tense until Dad joked, "Does that mean they could help me too? Lord knows I could use fashion advice." Everyone laughed, and the moment passed. Finally, it was Rebecca's turn to open my gift. I watched nervously as she unwrapped the photo album I'd spent weeks creating. Inside were carefully arranged photographs spanning our childhood to recent family gatherings, each with handwritten captions recalling the memory: Rebecca winning her first spelling bee, the two of us building sandcastles at Cape Cod, her college graduation. Rebecca flipped through it quickly, her expression unreadable. "Photos. How quaint." She closed the album and set it aside without looking through all the pages. "I guess this is what fits a $50 budget." My stomach tightened, but I managed to say, "I thought you might enjoy the memories." She might have let it go there, but Aunt Linda picked up the album and exclaimed, "Oh, Rebecca, this must have taken Samantha hours. Look at this detail, she even included that poem you wrote in 4th grade." Rebecca's face flushed. She snatched the album back and said loudly, "I could have ordered professional prints online in 5 minutes. This is why Sam's still driving that junk car and living in that tiny apartment. Such a cheapskate she can't even buy a real gift." The room went silent. I felt blood rush to my face as every family member stared either at me or uncomfortably at their laps. "Becky," Mom murmured, using Rebecca's childhood nickname. "That's not fair." Rebecca wasn't finished. "I'm just saying what everyone thinks. Sam acts like being cheap is some virtue, but it's really just sad. 32 years old, and what do you have to show for it? A car from the Obama administration and clothes from the clearance rack?" I sat frozen, humiliation washing over me in waves. The photo album I'd poured my heart into lay discarded on the coffee table. Cousin Mark cleared his throat awkwardly. Grandma Eleanor looked distressed. Dad started to say something, then stopped. "I think your sister put a lot of thought into that gift," Jennifer's husband offered, looking uncomfortable to be witnessing family drama. Rebecca rolled her eyes. "I'm not being mean, I'm being honest. Someone needs to tell her that being so tight-fisted is why she's still single. Men don't want to date women who calculate the tip down to the penny." That particular barb, bringing my romantic life into the public humiliation, was the final straw. I stood up abruptly. "Excuse me for a minute," I managed to say with surprising steadiness, though my hands were shaking. "I need some air." I walked calmly to the bathroom, closed the door, and finally allowed the tears to come. I could hear murmured conversation resuming in the living room, Mom's voice slightly raised, though I couldn't make out the words. Staring at my reflection in the mirror, I watched tears track down my flushed cheeks. Rebecca's words echoed in my mind, cutting deeper because they played into my own occasional doubts. Was I missing out on life with my careful planning? Was I foolish to delay gratification for a dream that might never materialize? No. The answer came with sudden clarity. I wasn't going to let Rebecca's materialism make me question my own values. Not anymore. I gripped the edges of the bathroom sink, taking deep breaths to steady myself. My reflection stared back, eyes reddened, cheeks flushed with humiliation. I reached for a tissue and carefully dried my tears, careful not to smudge my minimal makeup. "Don't let her win," I whispered to myself. Not this time. This wasn't the first time Rebecca had humiliated me publicly. Memories cascaded through my mind, my 16th birthday party when she'd mocked the drugstore makeup I'd carefully applied, my college graduation dinner when she'd questioned my choice of accounting as settling for boring, the Christmas she'd loudly wondered if my then-boyfriend was actually attracted to me or just settling. Each time, I'd swallowed my hurt, made excuses for her behavior, and maintained the peace. Why had I allowed this pattern for so long? The answer was complicated. There was the childhood conditioning. Mom and Dad always expected me, the sensible one, to be the bigger person when conflicts arose. There was my natural aversion to confrontation. And perhaps most powerfully, there was my genuine love for my sister and the memories of times when she had been my protector and best friend. I remembered the night I'd failed my first calculus exam in high school. Rebecca, home from college for the weekend, had found me crying in our shared bedroom. Instead of teasing, she'd sat beside me and said, "This doesn't define you, Sammy. You're smart and hardworking. One test doesn't change that." She'd helped me create a study plan and convinced Dad to work with me on the concepts I struggled with. That Rebecca, the sister who could be fiercely supportive, seemed to appear less and less as adult life pulled us in different directions. Our values had diverged, with Rebecca embracing a lifestyle centered on status and appearances while I prioritized financial security and meaningful impact. I splashed cold water on my face and considered my options. I could do what I'd always done, return to the living room, pretend her comments hadn't wounded me, and endure an uncomfortable evening before retreating to my childhood bedroom. I could make an excuse and leave early, driving back to Boston in defeat. Or I could do something I'd never done before, stand up to Rebecca publicly. The thought made my heart race with anxiety. Confrontation had never been my strong suit, and family gatherings hardly seemed the appropriate venue. What would Mom and Dad think? Would I be creating unnecessary drama? Then again, wasn't Rebecca the one who had created the drama in the first place? Why was I taking responsibility for maintaining peace that she had shattered? My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Lily. "Hope the family reunion isn't too painful. Remember what we talked about, your choices deserve respect." Lily had been encouraging me for years to establish stronger boundaries with Rebecca. "You're not a doormat," she'd said during our last coffee date. "And you're certainly not a cheapskate. You're one of the most generous people I know, with your time, your attention, your skills. That matters more than picking up the check or buying expensive gifts." Lily's message felt like permission to trust my instincts. I typed back quickly, "Time to stand up for myself. Wish me courage." Her response came immediately, "You've got this. I'm so proud of you." I tucked my phone away and looked at my reflection again. This time, I noticed the quiet determination in my eyes. I wasn't going to match Rebecca's meanness or create a scene, but I wasn't going to remain silent either. I would speak my truth, calmly, factually, and with dignity. What was my truth? That my financial choices weren't about being cheap but about prioritizing what truly mattered to me. That delayed gratification wasn't a character flaw but a strategy for achieving meaningful goals. That the community center I was building would provide opportunities for children who had none, and that was worth more to me than designer clothes or luxury vacations. I rehearsed what I might say, discarding approaches that seemed defensive or confrontational. I didn't want to attack Rebecca or make other family members uncomfortable. I simply wanted to stand in my own worth and correct the misconceptions about my life. Taking a final deep breath, I smoothed my navy sundress, the same one Rebecca had subtly criticized earlier, and straightened my shoulders. The modest pearl earrings that had been Grandma Eleanor's gift for my college graduation caught the light. They reminded me that true value often had little to do with price tags. As I prepared to leave the bathroom, a memory surfaced from our childhood. 10-year-old Rebecca, defending 7-year-old me from neighborhood bullies. "Nobody gets to be mean to my sister except me." Perhaps underneath her criticism lay some twisted form of protection, or perhaps she was battling her own insecurities in the only way she knew how. Understanding didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me approach the coming confrontation with compassion rather than matching hostility. This wasn't about punishing Rebecca or winning family approval. It was about honoring my own journey and the values that guided it. With newfound clarity and resolve, I unlocked the bathroom door. The murmur of conversation from the living room grew louder as I walked down the hallway. I noticed Mom had made coffee, the rich aroma filling the air. Plates of Grandma's homemade cookies were being passed around as the family attempted to move past the uncomfortable moment. I paused in the doorway, observing the scene. Rebecca was showing Aunt Linda something on her phone, probably photos from her recent European trip. Dad was engaged in conversation with Jennifer's husband. Grandpa George caught my eye and gave me an encouraging nod, as if he sensed what I was about to do. Taking a final steadying breath, I stepped into the living room, ready to reclaim my narrative. I walked into the living room with measured steps, aware of eyes turning toward me. Mom immediately stood up, concern etched on her face. "Samantha, honey, are you all right? I've made coffee." "I'm fine, Mom," I said with a smile more genuine than I'd expected. "And coffee sounds wonderful." The conversation had resumed awkwardly in my absence, with Uncle David describing renovations on his house while Rebecca scrolled through her phone, apparently bored. She glanced up as I entered but quickly looked away. I accepted a cup of coffee from Mom and took a position near the fireplace where everyone could see me. The muted conversations gradually fell silent as family members sensed I had something to say. "I'd like to clear something up, if everyone doesn't mind," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's about what Rebecca said earlier." Rebecca's head snapped up, her expression defensive. "Sam, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." I shook my head slightly. "It wasn't a joke, Beck. And that's okay. Because it gives me a chance to share something I've been keeping to myself for too long." Taking a sip of coffee to center myself, I continued, "For the past 5 years, I've been living what Rebecca calls a cheapskate lifestyle. I drive an older car that's reliable and paid off. I live in a modest apartment that meets my needs. I buy clothes that last rather than following trends. And yes, I'm careful with my money." Dad shifted in his seat. "Honey, you don't need to explain yourself. We know you're responsible with your finances." "Thank you, Dad, but I want to explain, not because I need to defend myself, but because I'm actually really proud of what I've been working toward." I set down my coffee cup and pulled out my phone. "The reason I've been so careful with my money isn't because I'm cheap or afraid to enjoy life. It's because I've been saving for something important." I opened my photo gallery and pulled up the architectural renderings. "For 5 years, I've been building a fund to create this, the Riverside Community Center." I passed my phone to Grandma Eleanor first, who examined the images with interest. "It's in one of Boston's underserved neighborhoods," I explained as the phone was passed around. "The area has one of the highest rates of juvenile crime in the city, but also some of the most resilient kids I've ever met through my volunteer work." As family members looked at the renderings, I continued my explanation. "The center will provide after-school tutoring, mentorship programs, career guidance, and a safe place for recreation. We'll have a computer lab, a small library, sports facilities, and a kitchen for cooking classes and community meals." Rebecca remained silent, her expression unreadable as my phone eventually reached her. She looked at the images longer than anyone else had. "I found the property 2 years ago, an abandoned community building that the city was willing to sell at a reduced rate for the right project. I've been working with a nonprofit development consultant to create a sustainable business model, applying for grants, and yes, saving every penny I could to make this happen." Uncle David leaned forward. "That's incredible, Samantha. Why didn't you tell us about this sooner?" I smiled. I wanted to be sure it would actually happen before I shared it. There were so many hurdles: zoning approvals, funding gaps, building assessments. But last month, I got the final loan approval from the Community Development Bank. We break ground next month. I pulled out a small folder from my purse and removed several photographs. "These are some of the kids I've been working with through the Big Sister program. They've been helping design the teen spaces in the center. That's Maya, she wants to be an architect someday. And that's Darnell, who's already an amazing chess player at 12. They deserve the same opportunities we had growing up, but their neighborhood has been neglected for decades." The photos were passed around as I'd done with the phone. When they reached Rebecca, she looked at them intently before passing them on without comment. So yes, I continued, my voice growing stronger, I drive an older car because every car payment I don't make is money that can go toward creating opportunities for these kids. I don't buy expensive clothes because I'd rather invest in their futures. That's not being a cheapskate, it's about prioritizing what matters most to me. I turned directly to Rebecca now. I've never judged your choices, Beck. If designer clothes and luxury trips bring you joy, that's your decision. All I ask is the same respect for mine. The room was silent for a moment before Grandpa George spoke up, his voice gruff with emotion. I couldn't be prouder of you, Samantha. Mom wiped tears from her eyes. Why didn't you tell us, honey? We could have helped. I needed to do this myself, I explained. To know that I could make it happen on my own terms. Uncle David cleared his throat. Well, you're not on your own anymore. My company could help with some of the construction work at cost. And I have contacts at several foundations that fund youth programs, Cousin Mark added. I'd be happy to make introductions. As family members began offering support and asking questions about the center, I noticed Rebecca slip out onto the deck. After answering several questions, I excused myself and followed her. She stood at the railing, looking out over the darkened lake. When she heard me approach, she spoke without turning. You must think I'm pretty shallow. I joined her at the railing. I don't think that, Beck. You should. She turned to face me, her expression unusually vulnerable. While you've been building something meaningful, I've been, what? Posting Instagram photos of expensive brunches? We've just chosen different paths, I said carefully. Your career is impressive. You've achieved exactly what you set out to do. Rebecca laughed without humor. Have I? Sometimes I don't even know anymore. She paused. That photo album you made, I actually love it. I don't know why I said those things. Don't you? I asked gently. She was quiet for a long moment. When did you become the successful sister? The one everyone admires? That was supposed to be me. It's not a competition, Rebecca. Isn't it? It always has been. She shook her head. God, that sounds awful. I'm sorry, Sam. I really am. Inside, I could hear the animated conversations continuing as family members discussed the community center. Rebecca and I stood in silence for a moment before she spoke again. Your center, it's amazing. Truly. I'm sorry I've been so critical of your choices. Thank you, I said simply. As we stood together looking out at the reflection of stars on the lake surface, I felt the first tentative steps toward a new kind of relationship with my sister, one built on honesty rather than competition, on mutual respect rather than judgment. When we returned inside, Uncle David was telling the others, I think we should all find ways to support Samantha's project. This is something our whole family can be proud of. Rebecca surprised me by speaking up. I agree. In fact, my company has a community outreach fund for local projects. I'm on the committee that approves grants. We should talk about an application, Sam. As the evening continued with a new energy of purpose and connection, I caught Grandma Eleanor watching me with a knowing smile. She beckoned me over to the sofa where she sat. I always knew you were saving for something special, she whispered, patting my hand. You remind me of myself at your age, seeing beyond what is to what could be. Looking around at my family, now excitedly discussing ways to support the community center, I felt a profound sense of peace. By standing in my truth without attacking Rebecca, I'd not only defended my choices but opened a door to deeper understanding and connection. And Rebecca, scrolling through the center's preliminary website on her phone and making notes, occasionally looked up to catch my eye with a smile that held the promise of healing. The atmosphere in the living room had transformed completely. What had been awkward tension just 30 minutes earlier had given way to excited conversation and renewed connection. Family members gathered in small clusters, discussing the community center and sharing ideas for how they might contribute. I could teach a weekly art class, Aunt Patricia offered. She had been an art teacher before retiring. The kids might enjoy learning different techniques. Cousin Jennifer, who worked in public relations, was already brainstorming media outreach strategies. We should connect with local news stations for the groundbreaking. Human interest stories get good coverage, especially when children are involved. Even Jennifer's investment banker husband seemed genuinely engaged. Have you considered setting up a matching donation program? I could talk to some colleagues who might be interested. Throughout it all, I found myself moving from conversation to conversation, answering questions and accepting offers of support with genuine gratitude. The project that had been my solitary focus for so long was suddenly surrounded by a network of family enthusiasm. Mom pulled me aside, her eyes still moist with emotion. I had no idea, Samantha. All this time, I thought. She trailed off, seemingly embarrassed. That I was just being frugal without purpose? I finished for her. She nodded, squeezing my hand. I should have known there was more to it. You've always had such a big heart. It's okay, Mom. I wasn't ready to share until I knew it would actually happen. Dad joined us, putting an arm around my shoulders. Your grandfather would be so proud, he said, referring to Mom's father whose inheritance had helped them buy the lake house. He always believed in giving back to the community. I noticed Rebecca standing slightly apart from the others, examining the property photographs I'd shared earlier. She seemed deep in thought, occasionally typing notes into her phone. When she saw me watching, she motioned me over. These architectural plans are impressive, but have you thought about the interior design? She asked, her marketing mind clearly at work. The right environment can make such a difference in how people engage with a space. I have some basic ideas, I replied, but I've been focused on the structural elements and programming. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. I know a fantastic interior designer who does pro bono work for community projects. She could help create spaces that are both functional and inspiring. That would be amazing, I said, genuinely touched by her offer. Our conversation was interrupted by Uncle David, who approached with determination in his stride. He was a successful contractor whose business had grown from a one-man operation to employing dozens of workers. Samantha, I've been thinking, he said, his voice carrying enough to draw attention from nearby family members. I want to match whatever you've saved for this center. Dollar for dollar. The room fell silent as I stared at him in shock. Uncle David, that's incredibly generous, but it's a substantial amount. I know what it's like to have a dream and struggle to make it happen, he interrupted gently. When I was starting out, your father loaned me money for my first real work truck. I never forgot that. This is my chance to pay it forward. Dad looked surprised. David, you paid back every cent of that loan. The money, yes. But the belief in me? That's something you can only repay by believing in someone else. Uncle David turned back to me. So, do we have a deal? Overwhelmed, I could only nod and accept his outstretched hand. Applause broke out around the room, and I noticed Mom discreetly wiping away tears. As the excitement continued, Grandma Eleanor motioned me to sit beside her on the sofa. She took my hand in her weathered one, speaking softly so only I could hear. I've watched you and Rebecca since you were little girls. She was always the butterfly, beautiful, drawing everyone's attention. You were the builder ant, quietly creating something substantial without fanfare. She patted my hand. The world needs both butterflies and builder ants, but the ants leave lasting legacies. Her words touched something deep within me. I've never thought of it that way. I've been saving something for you, she continued, reaching into her purse. She withdrew a small envelope and pressed it into my palm. I want you to use this for your center. Inside the envelope was a check that made my eyes widen. Grandma, this is too much. Nonsense, she interrupted firmly. Harold and I have lived frugally all our lives, much like you. We believe in leaving the world better than we found it. This money was going to be your inheritance someday anyway. I'd rather see the good it does while I'm still here. I embraced her gently, too moved for words. The party continued well into the evening, with the gift exchange long forgotten. At one point, I noticed Rebecca had disappeared. I found her in the kitchen, sitting alone at the breakfast table, looking through the photo album I'd made her. She looked up as I entered, her expression softer than I'd seen in years. "I was such a brat about this gift," she said, turning a page showing us as teenagers, arms slung around each other's shoulders at the lake. "It's actually the most thoughtful present anyone's given me in years." I sat across from her. "I'm glad you like it. Sam, I owe you a real apology," Rebecca said, closing the album carefully. "Not just for tonight, but for a lot of things over the years. We've both said and done things," I began, but she shook her head. "No, this one's on me. I've been competing with you since we were kids, and I don't even know why anymore." She looked down at her perfectly manicured hands. "Somewhere along the way, I started equating success with things rather than impact. Seeing everyone's reaction to your project tonight made me realize how shallow that is." "Your success isn't shallow, Beck. You've worked incredibly hard." "To what end, though?" She gestured toward the living room where family members were still discussing the community center. "No one's ever going to react that way to my new car or promotion. And they shouldn't." I reached across the table and took her hand. "It's never too late to find your purpose." Rebecca squeezed my hand and nodded. "Maybe you can help me with that." She drew a deep breath. "In the meantime, I meant what I said about the design help and the grant from my company. I want to be part of this, if you'll let me." "I'd like that," I replied honestly. When we returned to the living room, the conversation had evolved into planning a family volunteer day once the center was operational. Rebecca surprised everyone by suggesting she could lead a workshop on professional communication skills for the teenagers. "Many of these kids have never seen professional environments," she explained. "I could help them understand how to present themselves in interviews, write effective emails, and navigate office politics." The evening wound down gradually, with family members departing with warm hugs and promises to stay involved with the center's development. As I helped Mom and Dad clean up, I noticed Rebecca had returned to the deck alone. Drying my hands on a kitchen towel, I joined her outside. "Everything okay?" I asked. She nodded, looking out at the moonlight reflecting on the lake. "Just thinking about when we used to catch fireflies out here as kids. Remember how we thought they were fairies?" I smiled at the memory. "You were always trying to build them tiny houses out of leaves and twigs. And you were always worried we were keeping them from their families," Rebecca laughed softly. "I guess some things never change. You're still thinking about others first." As we stood side by side in comfortable silence, I realized that the evening's confrontation had achieved something I hadn't dared to hope for: the first steps toward healing our relationship. Not through my silence, as had been our pattern, but through honest communication and mutual respect. The gift exchange that had triggered such drama seemed trivial now. The real exchange had been something far more valuable: truth, vulnerability, and the rediscovery of our connection as sisters. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight dancing across the lake's surface. Most of the family had departed the previous evening, leaving just my parents, Rebecca, and me at the house. I woke early, as was my habit, and made my way to the kitchen to start coffee. To my surprise, Rebecca was already there, dressed in yoga pants and a Boston University sweatshirt she must have borrowed from Mom, a far cry from her usual polished appearance. "Morning," she said, somewhat tentatively. "I made coffee already." "Thanks," I replied, accepting the mug she offered. "You're up early." Rebecca shrugged. "Couldn't sleep much. Too much thinking." She gestured toward the deck. "Want to sit outside?" We settled into the Adirondack chairs overlooking the water, a comfortable silence between us as we sipped our coffee. The morning air was cool but pleasant, carrying the scent of pine and lake water. "I owe you a better apology than the one I gave last night," Rebecca finally said, eyes fixed on the horizon. I was defensive and still making it about me. You don't have to. I do, though. She turned to face me. Sam, I've been jealous of you for years, and I'm only just realizing it. This admission startled me. Jealous? Of me? You've always been the successful one, the one with the glamorous career and exciting life. Rebecca laughed without humor. That's what I wanted everyone to think. But do you know what I see when I look at you? Someone with purpose. Someone with real friends who call just to check in, not because they want something. Someone who knows exactly who she is and doesn't apologize for it. She looked down at her coffee mug. My life looks amazing on Instagram, but most nights I come home to an empty apartment and wonder if any of it matters. The promotions, the designer clothes, the exclusive restaurants, it all started to feel hollow a long time ago. Why didn't you ever say anything? I asked gently. Because admitting that would mean acknowledging that I made the wrong choices. That while I was climbing the corporate ladder and maxing out credit cards, you were building something meaningful. She shook her head. It was easier to criticize your lifestyle than question my own. The honesty in her words touched me deeply. It's never too late to change direction, Beck. Maybe. She took another sip of coffee. When I was looking at those kids' photos last night, I kept thinking about how I used to want to be a teacher before Dad convinced me that marketing would be more profitable. You'd be an amazing teacher, I said sincerely. You have a way of commanding attention and explaining things clearly. You think? A small smile played at her lips. I've been volunteering with a literacy program in New York occasionally. It's the only thing in my schedule that I genuinely look forward to. We sat in contemplative silence for a few moments before Rebecca spoke again. I meant what I said about helping with your community center. I'd like to be involved, not just with a corporate donation or occasional appearance, but regularly. The kids would benefit so much from your skills, I assured her. Your confidence, your communication abilities, those are things many of them haven't had models for. Do you think? She hesitated. Do you think I could maybe lead a regular workshop? Something about professional development or communication? Absolutely. We're planning to have career exploration activities for the teens. Your expertise would be perfect. Rebecca nodded, her expression more determined than I'd seen it in years. I'd like that. Our conversation was interrupted by Mom calling us in for breakfast. The rest of the morning passed pleasantly, with none of the tension that had characterized our interactions for so long. When it was time to depart, Rebecca hugged me tightly. I'll call you next week about those design contacts, she promised. And I want to see the site soon. I'd love to show you around, I replied, returning her embrace. 6 months later, a crisp autumn day found me standing on the steps of the newly completed Riverside Community Center, watching as children and teenagers streamed in for the grand opening celebration. The red brick building, once neglected and boarded up, now stood vibrant with new windows, colorful signage, and landscaping maintained by neighborhood volunteers. Uncle David had not only matched my savings but had coordinated donated materials and labor from his industry contacts, significantly reducing construction costs. Cousin Jennifer's media outreach had resulted in local news coverage and increased community awareness. Aunt Patricia had recruited several retired teacher friends to volunteer for educational programming. Most surprising, though, was Rebecca's transformation. True to her word, she had become deeply involved in the center's development. Her marketing expertise had helped secure additional corporate sponsorships, and her design contacts had created bright, inviting interiors that the kids loved. More importantly, she had launched a weekly professional skills workshop for teenagers that quickly became one of our most popular programs. Ms. Rebecca taught me how to do a proper handshake and look people in the eye, 15-year-old Darnell told a reporter during the opening. Now I got a weekend job at the grocery store. I spotted Rebecca across the crowded main hall, surrounded by a group of teenage girls. She was dressed simply but elegantly, her attention completely focused on the girls as they practiced introducing themselves professionally. When she caught my eye, she smiled and waved. Later, as the celebration continued, Rebecca joined me in the small office that served as the center's administrative headquarters. "This exceeded all expectations," she said, looking around at the colorful artwork created by the children already adorning the walls. "You must be incredibly proud." "I'm proud of what we've all accomplished together," I corrected her. This became so much more than what I originally envisioned. Rebecca perched on the edge of my desk. "You know, I gave notice at my job last week." "What?" I stared at her in surprise. "But you just got that promotion." "I did," she nodded. "And I realized it would mean more travel, more stress, and less time for what's become important to me." She gestured toward the main room where children were engaged in various activities. "I've been offered a position with an educational nonprofit that helps schools in underserved areas implement arts programming. The salary is significantly less, but the work matters," I finished for her. "Exactly." Her smile was genuine, reaching her eyes in a way I hadn't seen in years. "I used to think success meant a corner office and an expensive car. Now I'm not so sure." "Are you nervous about the change?" "Terrified," she admitted with a laugh. "But also excited in a way I haven't been in a long time. And I have my frugal sister to teach me how to live on a nonprofit salary." I laughed. "First lesson, the library has free books and movies." Our conversation was interrupted by Maya, the aspiring 12-year-old architect who had helped design the center's teen lounge. "Miss Sam, Ms. Rebecca. Come quick, they're cutting the ribbon for the computer lab." Hand in hand, we followed Maya to the newly equipped technology room where 20 computers stood ready to help bridge the digital divide for neighborhood children. Grandma Eleanor, who had insisted on attending despite her arthritis, was given the honor of cutting the ribbon. As cheers erupted, I looked around at the gathered community, neighborhood families, my own family members, volunteers, and supporters. In that moment, I realized that standing up for myself at that family party hadn't just been about defending my financial choices or revealing my secret project. It had been about claiming the authentic life I wanted to lead and inviting others to understand it. Rebecca squeezed my hand. "Who would have thought your cheapskate ways would lead to all this?" she whispered teasingly. "Who would have thought your marketing expertise would be perfect for nonprofit work?" I countered with a smile. Later that evening, after the last visitors had departed and we were cleaning up, Rebecca and I found ourselves alone in the main hall. "Do you remember what started all this?" she asked, collecting paper plates from a table. "Me calling you a cheapskate at the family party?" I nodded, straightening chairs. "It turned out to be exactly what we both needed." "How so?" "It forced me to stop hiding my dream and start sharing it. And it gave you a chance to recognize what was missing in your own life." Rebecca considered this. "I've been thinking a lot about why I was so critical of your lifestyle for so long. I think part of me always knew you were building towards something meaningful, and it made me confront the emptiness in my own choices." "They weren't empty choices, Beck. They just weren't the right ones for you." She nodded slowly. "The funny thing is, I'm happier now living in my smaller apartment, driving my less expensive car, and working at a job that pays half my old salary." "Because purpose matters more than possessions," I suggested. "Exactly." She looked around the center, at the colorful walls adorned with children's artwork, at the resources that would help change lives. "I always thought I was the successful sister. Now I realize we just defined success differently." As we finished cleaning and prepared to leave, Rebecca paused at the door. "Thank you, Sam." "For what?" "For not retaliating when I was cruel. For seeing the best in me even when I couldn't see it myself. For showing me another way to measure a successful life." I hugged her tightly. "That's what sisters are for." Walking out together into the cool evening air, I reflected on how one moment of standing up for myself had created ripples far beyond anything I could have imagined. By refusing to accept humiliation and speaking my truth with dignity, I hadn't just changed my relationship with Rebecca, I'd helped her find her own authentic path as well. The community center would change lives in the neighborhood, providing opportunities and support for children who needed them. But perhaps the most profound transformation had occurred between two sisters who had rediscovered their connection by learning to respect each other's different definitions of what made a life well lived. So what about you? Has someone ever criticized your choices only to later realize you were right all along? Or have you had to stand up for yourself when it would have been easier to stay silent? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding courage and staying true to yourself. Remember, true wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by the impact you make and the authentic connections you build along the way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.